Hello everyone, I am back for another Come Blitz with me. This will premiere New Year's Eve of 2020, and this will just be, as per usual, roughly a 30-minute video of me sort of talking while I play Blitz in the background. Just something you can play just in case, with the pandemic going on, maybe you can't spend the holidays with everyone you would traditionally like to spend the holidays with. So this is just something you can put in the background. I'd argue in the tier list of holidays, probably New Year's Eve is lower than a lot of other things. But, some people really do celebrate it. So I wanted to put out a video for that day. Plus, I didn't really want to make a normal Marvel Strike Force video that day, whenever this comes out. So this is what I wanted to do. As you can see, Cerebro and Zeeks have not changed their position since last time. I think just literally so much Sprite Cranberry. They have been stagnant for weeks in between now and when Christmas was. But I've been given the advice that maybe what I should do is, since I'm blitzing, since they're not saying much anyways, I might as well just only show the blitzing and me while I talk. So let's talk a little bit about superheroes today. That's what I want to talk about. I could talk about that for a long time. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So I grew up consuming a lot of superhero content. Oh, I should turn off Simblitz. I should actually, so you guys can actually see it while I'm playing. But I grew up with a heavy emphasis on DC. I was born in the early 2000s, so I had a bit of time with superheroes before they became mainstream. There was sort of this time, let me get some games. I've learned not to talk when I leave the mic because then it cuts me off. So I grew up for a little bit of time before superheroes were mainstream. You guys can see right here, this is Ultimate Alliance. Right there's Wolverine, and this was like edgy Wolverine with the tank top and all that on. And for a while, these were the superheroes I grew up with on the Marvel side. Marvel was really edgy when I was younger. The MCU wasn't really a thing. They didn't grow into this sort of family-friendly multimedia juggernaut, which I'm not complaining. I enjoy Marvel like that, but I grew up with a lot of DC. I watched a lot of the Justice League Unlimited show as a kid, and I really loved the DC characters like Justice League and Batman and Superman and Blue Beetle. I still think probably Blue Beetle, Flash, those are probably my favorite heroes. But I think Marvel is undeniably better at managing their characters. DC doesn't put out mobile games. They used to be better at traditional video games than Marvel, but now Marvel's been pushing out a couple more video games. And in terms of TV, DC had better TV than Marvel for a while, simply for the fact that DC did put out TV. It wasn't like their greatest. It was CW, like Flash and Arrow. I've stopped watching them, but I think The Flash was actually a pretty good show for quite a while, and I think Legends of Tomorrow was actually a pretty decent show. But they're nothing incredible. And Marvel's actually put out some relatively high quality stuff, and I'll talk more about that. But so DC and Marvel have sort of gone in these two different directions. I think nowadays DC's a little more edgy. Generally, they go for that edgy feel, since now Marvel's a little more the family friendly. But the DC heroes and the Marvel heroes operate in different ways. Essentially, DC superheroes are very like myths. Superheroes as a whole are like the modern day myths. Back in the day, they talk about Poseidon and Zeus, and they have their own little lore, and they're related to each other, and they have rivals and stuff like that. Now it's different. Nobody worships Batman, so I hope. Like, people used to worship Poseidon or something like that. But it's sort of, the DC characters are very moral. They don't act that human a lot of the time. There are people that take the characters and then write stories for them where they act very human-like. Like Superman had one where he was dying, a comic that they wrote for him, and it was very good. But there are, generally Superman just like, I'm a hero. I come in, I save the day, and then I leave. That's about it. I'd say Batman's probably one of the deeper characters in the DC universe, but generally DC characters don't focus that much on their personal life. I think that's where Marvel differs from DC. Marvel, really one of the biggest characters, Spider-Man, the whole thing is how he balances, how do I be Spider-Man and Peter Parker? That's a common thing with Marvel characters. They have a very human-like flaws. And DC, they learn from each other. DC picks up on some of this. Batman has very human flaws as well. But I'd say that's what Marvel's mostly well known for, is having these heroes manage personal lives while they're also superheroes. And I think that's what gives DC and Marvel a different flavor. I think when Marvel as a whole is a much more rich universe than DC. You know, from the top to the bottom, there's characters all throughout the Marvel universe, because you have all these characters, that all these side characters and stories that sort of build up the mythos around, like Daredevil. There's like 5 or 6 characters all built around just Daredevil, and I certainly think that holds back Marvel characters and like Marvel TV shows a lot of the time, because I think sometimes, like I think in the Netflix shows, they never figured out how to properly pace a show. None of them did. I think that was their biggest weakness. And I think they had way too many side characters that, like, I don't know how you're supposed to remember them. Like, they all look like they're just basic. Like, they're just guy or thug or girl. Like, there's no way to remember them. And I think certainly sometimes that drags down Marvel's characters, because of the fact that you have to remember all these side characters. There's something nice about DC just being like, it's Batman or it's Superman. And yeah, Superman has like Lois Lane and stuff like that, and I forget the name of the little kid that he worked with at the report at the like Time Central, something, whatever it's called, his news place. So they do have some side characters, but that's not really the focus of the DC characters, which I think is what I've sort of grown to like Marvel more, though, because when you look at the DC universe, I think really outside of the Justice League, there's not much there. DC, you know, they have other teams. They started to focus, like they had the Doom Patrol show, and they started to focus on Doom Patrol. They have Teen Titans / Young Justice, but even then, you know, sometimes those people filter into the Justice League once they've moved out of Teen. You know, once they get old enough, they move into the Justice League, and you know, they're not really separate organizations from each other. And I think that Justice League's a really cool team, but I think it leaves the DC universe feeling a little dry. As much as I love the characters, and it might just be, it may be as rich as the Marvel universe, but I just, if it is, they haven't done a good job of expressing how deep the universe is. What I think makes Marvel super awesome is, well, sort of what the mobile games represent, with this whole cosmic, global, and city distinction between characters. Really, Marvel, that's kind of ironic actually, not much goes on in the Marvel universe outside of New York City. Pretty much all the characters hang out in New York City, but in New York City, there's sort of these hierarchy of characters. You know, you have the cosmic, like Captain Marvel, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, that handle all these threats throughout the universe. You have global characters like Captain America, Iron Man. They'll go wherever in the globe to help out people. But I think what really makes the Marvel universe feel alive are the street level heroes like Luke Cage or Iron Fist or Daredevil. And it's sort of like you could just walk outside and like Luke Cage is helping somebody who is being robbed or something like that. I think that's what really makes the Marvel universe feel alive. And that is, DC doesn't really have something like that. They have street level heroes, but most of the street level heroes are on the Justice League. So it's sort of different, you know. Daredevil, he's worked with the Avengers, but he's his own entity. You know, he works on the streets. He's never really risen up to that Avengers level like permanently. So I think that's what's really interesting about the Marvel universe. And of course, that backfires, like I talked about earlier in the Netflix shows, where you have all these side characters that you don't care about, and it clutters up things. But I think when it's done well, it makes the Marvel universe feel super cool and super deep. And I think it also feels super deep because of these mobile games. If you think about it, Longshot, like, what are they doing with Longshot? Like, Longshot's kind of like a D-tier hero in the Marvel universe. Like, nobody would know who Longshot was if they didn't have mobile games. Because of the mobile games, Contest of Champions, in this game having Longshot, suddenly Longshot feels like a much more intricate part of the Marvel universe. He feels like he's right with everyone else. And you know, he's not just some nobody. He really feels like he belongs, and you know his personality. Even though you probably haven't read a comic book about Longshot, I think that's what really helps Marvel as well with all these mobile games. You know, we have Contest of Champions, Strike Force, Future Fight with like 150 plus characters, and people get attached to these characters without even having to ever consume any media relating to them, and it brings them all together too. I think by having Longshot sitting next to Captain America in battles in Marvel Strike Force, it helps sort of string together this Marvel universe that DC doesn't really have, because DC doesn't put out video games. I don't really know why DC doesn't put out more video. There's a market for it. I mean, I think there is definitely a market of people that are willing to pick up DC video game. Right now they have DC Legends, but I think that's been outclassed by most other games in its field. And I don't think DC keeps up as well. But so essentially the point of that sort of tangent right there is I really did like the DC universe as a kid. I like a lot of the characters. I like how simple and enjoyable their stories are. And I still think Flash, Black Lightning, he's super cool. Blue Beetle, I love those characters. But I think the richer universe is definitely Marvel. And now whether that is just better writing or better handling of the IP, that could be up to for you to decide. But let's talk about some of my favorite heroes throughout the Marvel and DC universe. So we can talk about DC first because I think they're a little more simple, and really they're blue. I like the color blue, so really it's the blue character. Like Blue Beetle, I think is just super cool. Not the old blue. There's two different Blue Beetles. There's like this more Batman-like Blue Beetle where he just has tech, and then there's like this Blue Beetle that has an alien scarab on the back of him that sort of puts a suit around him. I think Blue Beetle's super cool, and it might be because of Young Justice that I really like him as much as I do. I won't talk much about it, but he sort of, there's this whole race of beetles, like 8 beetle aliens, and there's all these colors of them, and there's evil ones and there's good ones, and it's really engaging sort of how Blue Beetle has the scarab on his back, and he has this temptation. The scarab kind of wants to do the more alien thing, take over the earth, and Blue Beetle's like, no, like let's use this for good. I think it's a really engaging story right there, and I think his power set's pretty cool a lot of the time. I think Nightwing is a awesome character in terms of what he contributes to the universe. I think it's sort of character development to a certain extent, where he's Robin, but he sort of moved on from Batman and he's sort of doing his own thing. I really like Nightwing. He also just looks super duper cool. Flash, I'd say I just like the Flash because I think when I was a kid I liked him because he was a redhead, and I was a redhead. I was like, I relate to that. And then I grew up watching the TV show, and that was a pretty special time when the CW shows were good and were on TV. Nowadays they don't feel as special as they used to because now there's a ton of superhero TV shows. But at the time, Arrow really was, leading the way. It was a very innovative show in a way for somebody to be like, let's take a superhero and let's make a superhero show. I think probably the closest thing up to that point was Smallville. I never watched it, but it was sort of like, it was like a Superman show, but it wasn't really, it was more like a Clark Kent show or something like that. So the Arrow was the first time like, let's make a superhero show, and he does a lot of superhero stuff pretty consistently, and it had not the highest budget, but it had a pretty decent budget. And I think that Arrowverse they built up with the Flash and Green Arrow, and it got a little confusing with Black Lightning and Supergirl because they were from different universes and stuff like that. But I really like what they were doing there for a while. I think it got away from them a little bit, and I think their writing's not the greatest, and I think as I got older I started to see that. But I really like the Flash simply because of those TV shows, and I was just enjoyed them on the Justice League. I like the dynamic they have there. I'd say another, probably Plastic Man. I'm a huge fan of Plastic Man. Actually, let me get this for you. Look, Plastic Man, super cool. He was a criminal, and I believe he used to be, I believe Batman knocked him into chemicals, and I think that's how he got his powers. I'm pretty sure it was Batman that knocked him into a pool of chemicals that made him all stretchy when Batman was fighting as a criminal. And so I really like Plastic Man. I think his power set's kind of cool too. He's like a funny Mr. Fantastic. So I've always enjoyed it when he gets to participate on teams just because of how funny he is. And I think it's kind of interesting that a lot of the DC characters are sort of these characters who have a dynamic going on. Plastic Man's always facing his criminal past. He's always tempted, like, maybe I could steal something again, or should I be a good guy? Blue Beetle's resisting the alien sort of urges to kill everyone, and Nightwing's learned from his past. I think those are the best DC characters right there. And I think what you can also see, those characters they play off of other characters. Nightwing, he is Batman's protege that has grown up. Plastic Man had a run-in with Batman, and that's how he got his powers, and stuff like that. I think it's kind of cool when everything ties together like that. On the Marvel side, some of my favorite characters, I really like Man-Thing. I like Swamp Thing too. Swamp Thing's story in the comics is actually kind of deep. It's a little depressing, actually. Spoilers, I guess, but I've read a bit about it, and essentially he was like a plant researcher, and he got caught. It's like a terrorist bombed his sort of plant research facility, and he got caught in the explosion. He sort of dove into a swamp to protect himself, and then the swamp sort of merged with him, and it became Swamp Thing. And sort of like, oh my gosh, it's one of those traditional, like, oh my gosh, I'm so ugly now, like nobody likes me. But then it gets revealed later on that the Swamp Thing actually isn't the guy that dove into the swamp. Like, the guy who dove into the swamp's dead. He died when that bomb went off, and Swamp Thing is actually just a bunch of sentient swamp particles that believe they're this guy. And it's sort of, it becomes this deep, like, what makes you human, you know? Like, is he really human because he thinks he's this other guy, or is he actually just not human because of the swamp particles? That they get kind of pretty deep with Swamp Thing. They kind of lose me after a little bit, but I think that's a really engaging story right there, and I'm a big fan of that. Man Thing, I'm not sure about Man Thing's origin, although I know he plays a pretty critical role in the Marvel universe. He's like the guardian of, like, the center of all the realms, or something like that. The nexus of all realities. I think Man Thing guards that, which I was disappointed because they mentioned that in the Marvel Strike Force story, but Man Thing was not there. You also can't kill Man Thing. He always comes back. I just like their designs too. I enjoy it when there are characters in stories that are not just humans. I always enjoy that when they sort of go away from that. Like, I used to play Paladins of Smite, and I always enjoyed it when they'd add a character that was not just another human. I think that makes them very visually engaging. So that's why I always like Swamp Thing and Man Thing. In terms of some other Marvel characters I've grown to like, I really enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy. I wouldn't say I really didn't read anything about them. I'm going to be honest, just because of the Marvel movies. I really enjoyed James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I thought they're probably my favorite out of all the Marvel movies. I think they stand out. I think the Marvel movies, of the Marvel movies, but they are a little bland. Generally, they're very gray. Not a lot of color for superhero stories, and I really enjoy the color in the Guardians of the Galaxy, the atmosphere, and I enjoyed the dynamic there because there's not a lot of just normal humans. You know, Star-Lord's probably the most normal out of the rest of them. Gamora and Drax are kind of human-like, but they're still aliens. And you have Groot and Rocket Raccoon, and I just think that their movies were really well done, so that's why I've really grown to like the Guardians of the Galaxy a lot. Some other characters I really like in terms of the X-Men. Some of my favorites from X-Men. We do not have either of them right now. I'm a big fan of Gambit and Nightcrawler. Gambit, I don't really care much for his personality or anything. I just think he's cool. Like, just throwing out the cards and they explode. Like that's epic. That's just so cool. Gambit doing that. He's such a cool guy. That's why I like Gambit. I think Nightcrawler, the reason why I like him so much is, well, I think his story is very engaging. Generally, when he was first written, he came from a very religious place, and he sort of turned into this blue. He kind of looks like a demon if you think about it. Like, he's like an elf demon-like thing, and he was sort of, he was chased by like a mob where he lived for how he looked, because he looked like this sort of weird demon thing, and they thought it was like some spawn of the devil or something like that. And he's sort of running from that, and he finds the X-Men that sort of look after him, and I enjoyed that. I think that's an interesting struggle he has, but I just think I like him because, again, he doesn't look like a normal human. Like, he looks different than everyone else in the Marvel universe, and I think he's been developed quite well in terms of his visual distinction, like the poof when he disappears and stuff like that, and his swords. I just think they did a good job distinguishing Nightcrawler from a lot of other heroes throughout the Marvel universe. In terms of other ones, I love Ant-Man. I really do like Ant-Man. I'm not a big fan of his movies in the MCU. I think his movies are a little bland, a little basic, but I think Ant-Man in concept, I think he's one of the strongest Marvel heroes. I really think it'd be awesome to have like an Ant-Man versus Thanos fight. Like, imagine Ant-Man like summoning like an army of ants, or like he goes in small and he starts like punching Thanos, and then he grows super big and he tries to stomp on things. Like, Ant-Man, he's always wasted. He's full of wasted potential. Like, the concept of somebody that can grow big and small at any time is just enormous. Like, how crazy his powers could be. And they always play him off as like, oops, my suit isn't working in the movies or something like that. Like, the closest, like when Ant-Man went big in the end of Endgame, I got so excited because that was like finally Ant-Man going crazy. Like, oh my gosh, it was like a dream come true. I mean, Ant-Man is literally, there's so much potential with Ant-Man, and he's sort of like Plastic Man. The current Ant-Man, there's Scott Lang and Hank Pym. They moved away from Hank Pym because Hank Pym had some questionable writing back in the 80s. He was a little abusive. So Marvel was like, we're just going to introduce a new Ant-Man. So they moved to Scott Lang, and Scott Lang sort of stole the suit from Hank Pym. So sort of like an ex-criminal that now has this suit, and he's decided to become a hero. It's kind of engaging. It's like Plastic Man a little bit, he has a criminal past, but he also wants to be a hero. So I really enjoy that a lot. in terms of, I think the Spider-Man mythos as a whole, I think in all comics, I think Spider-Man and Batman, I think they have the strongest mythos around them. I think Spider-Man, his rogues gallery, the other spider people, I think is really impressive. Same thing for Batman, this family he's built up around him, and the enemies he fights are just incredibly engaging. I really do like Batman, Spider-Man's characters. I'd say my favorite Spider-Man character is Miles Morales. Really, Miles Morales. Well, of course, Into the Spider-Verse was very good. I did like Into the Spider-Verse a lot, but I think the reason why I like Miles Morales so much is he was like the only comic book I read legit growing up. Really, comic books I've read, they're just random ones I picked up. Like I never read like a series through. I just like I had an assortment that we'd pick up from stores or stuff and read. And occasionally I'd have a volume of something I'd read. But Miles, I'd actually pick up his comic issue by issue. No, I don't think I made it that far. I made like issue 8 or 9, but Miles Morales always has a place in my heart because of the fact that I did read his story as legitimate as I ever have read any comic book character story. Another character I really like, Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight, well, he's just cool. Like he just looks cool. He's kind of like Batman. But I like the whole idea that he's in white. He's like, I want people to see me. And I think when Moon Knight's written well, he's really engaging. He has these split personalities and he's sort of dealing with that. And I think that's it's a really cool premise, and when done, it can be played a little more for comedic effect. You know, they've played it for comedic effect sometimes, but I think also the wear on Moon Knight from having all these personalities, I think also is super engaging. So just really big fan of Moon Knight. I do like Moon Knight. I like Warwolf. I like Warwolf a lot. I only like him because of Future Fight. I played Future Fight. I used Warwolf for a long time as my combat character back in the day. But Warwolf's probably useless nowadays in Future Fight, but I really liked Warwolf. He's just a werewolf. I don't know much about him. He's on S.H.I.E.L.D. He just looks cool. I love Werewolf. I think I've grown to like Daredevil a lot because his show was very well done. I think the Netflix Marvel shows, I'm kind of glad that they stopped doing those because they all had the same problem. Their pacing was so bad. You know, they were like, all of them were like 13 or so episodes long when they really felt like they should have been like 8 or 9 episodes long. And they had, each of those shows had like side characters that like I didn't care about. Like Daredevil season 3, everything around Bullseye and Daredevil was like masterpiece. It was so well written. But like Foggy was really poorly written in my opinion. Like some of the stuff he said, I was like, oh my gosh. But I really grown to like Daredevil simply for how he wrote him. A much more grounded take on Daredevil than I had ever had up until that point, and sort of how he gets tired during fights and stuff. I mean, it's just really clever stuff that they show with Daredevil that makes him feel more human than I think him or most other heroes have generally felt. If I were to sort the Netflix shows from best to worst, I never watched the 3rd season of Jessica Jones. I kind of want to watch the 2nd season of Punisher, but I'd say the best, I think, was honestly Jessica Jones season 1. I think her and Kilgrave. That was just really well written. I mean, it not for the kids. Jessica Jones and Kilgrave. That was some deep stuff because essentially he could make people do whatever he wanted, and it's very interesting because he's like, how do you deal with somebody that can make people do whatever he wants? Because he could, you know, he could be like, stick your hand. Like at one point, he's like, you can arrest me, but I told this guy to stick his hand in a blender if I don't come back in 10 minutes. It's like, what do you do? Like, it's very engaging, Kilgrave, and he's just everything about that. I thought that was a very, very, very well done set of episodes right there. I think Daredevil season 1 I'd probably put up there. I'm kind of nostalgic for that because it was like the first. It was a lot like the Arrow. It really was groundbreaking because I think Daredevil, it was like the Arrow but high budget. And you're like, oh wow, like you can do this, but like actually like good. Like people just liked Arrow because it was like, oh nice, it was nice to see a hero on the screen. But like Daredevil was like actually good TV. So I think it was really engaging for that. And I think Daredevil season 3 was also really good. And I had the same problem. The first 2 episodes were so boring, but then it got super good. I like Luke Cage a lot. I thought Luke Cage was a very fun take. I just like Luke Cage too. I think he's a fun character. I always enjoy watching Luke Cage. I'd say Iron Fist was probably the worst. I did watch Iron Fist season 2. I thought it got a little better, but I just thought it was pretty weak as a whole. I don't know. I think to see the characters go to Disney Plus, that's not confirmed, but there's some people that have played the characters in the show that I think they're looking to bring over again for the Disney Plus renditions of stuff and the Disney renditions. I think Daredevil, the guy who played Daredevil, Charlie Cox, I think is his name. I think he was incredible. I think he should come back. I really like the guy who played Luke Cage. I forget his name, but I really did enjoy him. I thought he played a very good Luke Cage. I don't know. I liked him a lot as Luke Cage. I mean, of course, who knows? There could be something better out there. I was a big fan of him. I like the girl that played Jessica Jones. I think Jessica Jones could have been written better, but I was like, oh yeah, that's Jessica Jones. Iron Fist, I think we could maybe do better for Iron Fist. It wasn't bad. I don't know. I just didn't. Again, the writing was really bad for Iron Fist season 1, so maybe I just have a bad taste in my mouth for Iron Fist. But I don't know. I think they could do better for Iron Fist. But I really love a lot of who they cast, so I hope they keep some of that for the Netflix shows, because they're pumping out a lot of those now. Well, they will be. Ironheart, Scarlet Witch. Well, what's it called? Vision and Wanda and Vision, the Loki show. They're doing an Ironheart show. They're putting out a lot of stuff, so we'll see how good it is. A Moon Knight show, so I'm very excited for that. But I would like if they kept some of what they did for the Defenders. I really enjoyed it. I think what really held the Defenders back was its lack of connection to the Marvel Universe. I think it's because they didn't want it to be that connected, but I think instead, if like, just imagine, like, at one point they're fighting on the streets and like Iron Man flies overhead, and that's it, or like just a little more connection to the MCU as a whole. I think would have done a lot of good instead of just being like, guys, don't forget we're in the same universe as the MCU. Same thing for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They got the short end of the stick. They should have been able to reference more of the MCU. Or I think what would have been cool is if the Netflix shows played off of the snap. That's a huge deal. Canonically in Marvel, there are 5 years or so where half the universe was dead. That is like big. That's, I mean, Endgame just sort of like, they were like, oh yeah, by the way, 5 years, people have been dead. But that is humongous. Like the writing potential there is crazy. And I think if Marvel was really smart, they would have planned out the Daredevil show, the Iron Fist show, the Punisher, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, to have like maybe there's season 2 or season 3 be all focused around the snap. Like what did Captain America went to like some meeting for people that lost others to talk, but like imagine Luke Cage, like street level heroes having to deal with this level of loss in the world. I think that would have been incredibly engaging. Now, of course, we would have they would have had to Daredevil season 3. We would have maybe missed out on that. So, but there's some duds in there. We could have switched out the duds for some very canonically close seasons, or if those were on Disney Plus ahead of time, and we wouldn't have to worry about the transfer of do we keep this when it moves over to Disney Plus or not. But that would have been so cool. I hope they go back and focus on that time period a little more, because I think there's a lot of writing potential right there. Other favorite superhero movies, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman 1. I thought that was DC's movies. I think the new Suicide Squad's gonna be pretty good because James Gunn's directing that one too. But I thought Wonder Woman 1 was actually it has probably one of the best superhero moments out of any movie, like superhero movie I've ever watched. I think spoiler alert, when she walks out onto the field, I think that is a super powerful moment for Wonder Woman. They sort of set it up for this really long time. It's like, you don't go out there, that's how you die. Nobody steps out there. There's really war-torn area. Everyone's super like tired and dirty. And, Wonder Woman just steps out. She's like, nah, I can handle this. And they're like, no, don't go out there. And she just like destroys them, and she saves the town. And it gets even more intense when later on the town gets gassed. They bomb the town, and everything Wonder Woman did was for nothing. Now, of course, I think the Wonder Woman movie fell apart. The third act, the whole Ares thing, I thought was a little weak. But the first 2/3 of that movie, I think, are super powerful and very engaging. And I really did like that. I think Into the Spider-Verse, very well done. I don't even have to talk about it. I mean, it's such, everyone, I mean, that was a very well done movie. I thought Logan was incredibly well done. It's very depressing. That was a sad movie. But I think what was really nice was the send-off. Hugh Jackman, I believe was his name, for Wolverine. I think he was an incredible Wolverine actor. Not everyone who plays a superhero gets to get that level of send off. For example, Green Arrow, the guy that played him in Green Arrow, and of course I didn't finish this season, the one of the last season of Arrow, but I did watch one of the last crossovers, and spoiler alert for anyone that cares, they did kill the Green Arrow in that crossover. I imagine he probably comes back. I hope I hope they would bring him back, because the send off was pretty poor for him. He's just like, man, he dies and he sacrificed himself. It wasn't that good. So I hope they rewrite. I don't know what they did with him. I imagine they did something more, but that's an example of somebody that got a pretty bad send off. There are a lot of people that play heroes, and then the last movie just comes and goes, and they don't really get any recognition for playing the character. Sort of like Patrick Stewart with Professor X. I thought he was really good as Professor X. There's a lot of people that, I mean, I guess you could count Logan, but did he play? I think he might have been in. I'm not sure, but I think there are really incredible actors that play these characters, and they don't get the send off. And I think Logan just groundbreaking, really, for superhero movies, to sort of end them, to end Wolverine, be like, Wolverine's done. Generally, if it's working, keep making more movies about it. But with Logan, they're like, no, like, this is it for Wolverine. It takes it to the end with Wolverine. It was a very solid movie. Did brought X-23 into the limelight a little bit. It did a little bit for X-23, made her a little more popular. But very, very good movie. I sometimes just sit there thinking about it. I mean, it was just, that was well done. My next favorite Marvel movie was Venom. No, just kidding. Although I did think, I like the idea of them pumping out more of these lower quality Marvel movies. Like, I think Morbius is probably gonna be about as good as Venom was, but I sort of enjoy Sony being like, we have characters too, and pumping out like these okay movies. Like, I thought Venom was fine. I thought it had some fun moments. It was no masterpiece or anything, but I mean, more characters in the limelight, the better for the video games. I think what's really interesting this year is Marvel Strike Force. Generally, the Marvel mobile games play off of this whole Marvel movie comes out, everyone loves the new characters, they want to go play a game related to them, you release a movie related update, you cruise on that for 3 months until the next movie comes out, release another update relating to the next movie, cruise on that hype, release a couple more updates in between. But this year, the Marvel video games had to make it on their own. Black Widow, I think they were counting on that Black Widow spike, coast through, release a Black Widow update, make a lot of money. But essentially, these games had a full year. Just do whatever they want, add whatever character. Longshot, we would not have been seeing Longshot coming to this game if they had to make movie tie-in updates as well. So really cool that we got to see this. Hopefully Wanda and Vision, they get some kind of rework or something for the WandaVision, because I really do think, they're like married. I really think they should be on a team together in this game. But we'll probably wrap up this battle, but I'll finish talking about Marvel and DC. Let's talk about the future and end it up. I think DC, I watched Wonder Woman 84. I didn't think it was that good. I think the new Suicide Squad's looking good. I heard Doom Patrol and the Titan show wasn't bad. I don't know. I think DC goes too fast. They really, like, I just wish they sat down and were like, let's just make a good movie. Like, we don't have to build up anything. We don't have to introduce a bunch of characters. Let's just make, like, I think Joker. Like, they sat down. They're like, let's just make a good movie with the DC characters. And I thought Joker was a pretty good movie. It's become a bit of a meme, but I think as a whole that was a relatively innovative superhero movie, really stretching what it means to be a superhero movie with the Joker movie. And I think it was pretty good for what it tried to do. So if DC can do more of that, I think Suicide Squad, I think that's going to do very well. I think it's going to be an incredible movie. So maybe that'll help out a little bit. Maybe that'll help DC realize, oh, maybe let's just make some good stuff. I don't know. They can't do what Marvel's doing. Marvel has such impressive groundwork and so much more they're going to do. I don't know how DC can compete. I think Marvel has, once they start rolling out all these TV shows they're talking about, it's a bit of a drought for Marvel content during the pandemic. Kind of a bummer. But I think, they have all these TV shows in the work. They have dozens of movies in the work. I think that it's just going to start flowing at some point here, and it's going to be pretty awesome, especially when these lesser known characters get to sort of play off stuff. And what's nice is the comics have this deep lore that they reference, and there's becoming to be so much cinematic content that they're starting to pull off of that. Like Ironheart is obviously a reference to Iron Man, but she's a spin off of Iron Man. You have to know about Iron Man, and then Ironheart's story gets more meaningful to you. And the comics could do that because the people knew about Iron Man there. now that Iron Man has been critical to the MCU and he's had his run through here, you know, now you can start building up mythos in the MCU about, you know, these characters that are related to characters in the Marvel universe, and that's enough to go off of. Now you can be like, well, this guy is related to this guy in the Marvel universe, at the cinematic universe, and I think that's really awesome what the Marvel universe did. I think there's certainly a worry about a bubble bursting, about you know, too much superhero content, and you know, I think that's possible. I think I think CW saw that a little bit. They had all these shows, they're very samey, and you know, I stopped watching them. I certainly don't think they're doing as well as they used to. But I think what's nice about, you know, westerns, those were pretty big back in the day, not really big anymore. I think what's interesting about superheroes, it's very flexible, the genre. There's really anything could be a hero movie, you know, like Frozen's technically a hero movie. You know, you've been watching westerns were hero movies. You've been watching hero movies, you know, your whole life. You just don't really realize it. So I sort of think, as long as there's different takes on characters and stuff like that, as long as we have things come out like Logan or Joker or The Boys, or you know, the new Suicide Squad movie, you have some more different tones superhero movies. I think we should be able to consistently release new superhero content and be engaged. And I think also the characters have different feels. You know, I think the X-Men feel different than the Avengers to watch on TV, simply for the fact that they're just, you just look visually distinct because different people created them back in the day. I think different people made the X. I think was that all Stanley, Jack Kirby? Like, was that, I feel like I think different. I mean, there are characters made by other people, and you know, naturally they feel different. You know, have some characters like Cable who give off a lot of 90s edge and stuff like that, or Venom, but then you know, you've Captain America, kind of a goody two shoes, and so naturally before you even start writing the story, I think those characters feel very different to watch. You know, I think if you're to focus only on fight scenes, you know, yeah, there's only so many fight scenes you can do, but I think stories as a whole in relation to superheroes, I think there's a lot you can do. And I mean, Marvel believes that there is a lot of untapped potential right here. And I think, you know, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I think they're going for a bit of a different feel, sort of more a, you know, sort of like, what do we do now after, it's a different, you haven't really seen a story like that where it's like two people, they're like, how do we follow up after Captain America's legacy? Like, how do you follow up on something? You know, a WandaVision, it's more of a trippy, like, I mean, honestly, I didn't think much of that show, but after seeing the commercials, it's, I really like what they're going for. It's like, you know, Wanda dealing with the trauma of everything that's gone on in the MCU, and it's like how she copes with it. And you know, that's a pretty powerful concept for a story right there. Loki, I don't think they're going for anything too deep with him. I think it's just more like a wacky exploring the universe or something like that. But I really think stuff like that shows that there's a lot of flexibility in the superhero genre, and I think, you know, there's room for always some more stories and stuff like that. I think Invincible's coming to Amazon soon, sometime here, an animated show about superheroes. I think that's going to be very good. I know the premise of the comic book, and he's a very engaging character, and I think that's going to be a very engaging show, assuming it's written well. So I'm very excited for that in the future. But I just talked about superheroes for like 40 minutes, and you know, I really like superheroes. I've been consuming content about superheroes since a wee little person all the way up until now, and I really enjoy them. I always enjoy taking a chance to talk about them, so I hope you enjoy this little talk about superheroes. You know, let me know down below what your favorite superhero stories are, or your favorite superheroes. But I hope, actually, let's flip back over to my but I hope you had a awesome time blitzing with me today. Maybe if you needed to kill half an hour or so, this is a nice way to kill half an hour. You had in the background while you're eating or something like that. So I hope you all have a happy and healthy holidays, and I will see you guys in the next video. Signing off, everyone.